All right, Carl.
All right. First off, Ron, thank you. Ian, thank you. Um, I will start by kind of giving you the genesis story of this idea of having this show. We started with the vintage schmintage show, and we did a couple rounds of that. And what I would do a ton of research, and I would have a whole presentation going. And I realized real quickly that I wasn't able to get more than 10% of what I wanted to say out. And during that time we were doing those shows, I had an opportunity to go out to Ohio, where Ron is from, because and Ron, feel free to step in here if I'm not portraying this accurately. But Ron and Dave, my boss, worked out a deal where Ron was going to put his guitars up in our collection. So we've got a big museum upstairs that has probably one of the bigger collections of American-made vintage electric guitars anywhere. And Dave's Rickenbacker collection was maybe 10 to 20 guitars. And I went out to meet Ron to pick up these guitars, and Ron had so many guitars out there. I had to go twice. I had to drive all the way out there two different times to fill up all those guitars. And so I'm spending 9 hours each way in a car thinking about Rickenbacker guitars. And I've been working on Rickenbackers pretty much my whole career, but I've never really known that much about them. I can work on them, but when it comes to the models, the timeline, the history, the specifics, it was kind of a blank spot in my knowledge base. So I thought, instead of doing another vintage mintage where I'm trying to squeeze in, all this information into a quick thing, maybe I can get Ron on here, and Ron can explain to me and everyone else exactly how he looks at Rickenbackers and how he categorizes them and organizes them in his brain. So I took videos of all the guitars in the collection, and I made a timeline of it's a real abridged timeline. There's just too much to talk about, but if you're going to go into the frying pans and all the amplifiers and the basses, I thought maybe what we would do is just kind of keep it to the models that we're used to seeing, and then just do a dive into that, and then try and maybe, Ron, it portray to us how you view all that stuff. So Ian, maybe just for starters, you could pull up the video of the collection and give people an image of what we're talking about here. There's two videos that are roughly a minute long.
Is this one of them that you wanted to see?
Correct. Yep.
And those are basically the Capris all lined up there with the gold pick guards. Capris from the 59 to 1960 era.
And Ron, what would you say? Probably 8 out of 10 of those are yours, or came from you.
Yeah, more or less. That seems to be about right. Those are some convertible guitars at the end there with the doohickey by the neck pickup. Yeah. Different models. In late 66 and 67, Rickenbacker got this idea that the 12 strings were so popular, but people were saying, well, I can't play a 12 string and then put it down and pick up a 6 string for my next tune. So Rickenbacker got this hold of this inventor who invented this thing called a convertible comb that pulls down the octave strings on the 12 string. And theoretically, you should be able to make a sound you play, just like a 6-string, but of course your fretting hand is hitting on all 12 strings. And it was a nice idea, but really never took off. So those things are kind of collector's items, curiosity pieces, but I've ended up with several of them.
Yeah. So Ron, how would you explain your history from the first Rickenbacker you got to what that collection turned into?
Well, I'm going to date myself here, but I got a guitar when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and then saw the Hard Day's Night movie. I thought this is cool. We get into a band, and through a long series of guitar trades, starting off with a Silvertone Harmony 6-string, I worked my way up to a Vox 12-string, and then I got an opportunity to get a Rickenbacker 12-string on a trade. So I got a 360 12 Rickenbackers 1966 model, and played in a band pretty successfully through end of high school, early college years, and then gave it up and went on to finish some degrees in college. And in the early 90s, I got interested in guitars again, and I was going to vintage places and looking around. I wanted to find that Rickenbacker guitar that I had when I was 17, and started looking around. I found that, and I discovered there's a whole realm of Rickenbackers I never had experience with. All these older Rickenbackers with gold pick guards and the big F bodies and the small, 325s, and I just became really fascinated with them, and started collecting them here and there. And I really built up most of my collection in the 1990s and the early aughts, so to speak. And I just kept on going for the vintage stuff. And when everybody else seemed to be going for Strats and Tellys, I was finding these Capris that were going for a couple of thousand here and there. And I thought, well, I can afford that. I can't afford a Strat at that point. I can't afford a Telly. So I just kept on scooping up the Rickenbackers, and I had pretty much just collected. I wasn't trading a lot. I was just saving up and buying them as I found them, and I ended up with quite a few of them actually.
Yeah, and yeah, you weren't just. It's not just Rickenbackers you collected. A lot of that collection was Brown and Tweed Fender amps.
Yep, I started in with the Tweed amps. I mean, back in the Wild West days of eBay, you could get a Tweed Deluxe or a Tweed Harvard in nice shape for like $300, and I started digging into that market with the Tweeds and the brown face amps. And I also was really into Jazz Masters. They were also neglected in the 90s, and people that weren't into them at all. So I was scooping up custom color Jazz Masters and Sunburst Jazz Masters. And that's kind of my collection was pretty heavy on Jazz Masters, Rickenbackers, and Fender amps. I also was picking up a lot of Rickenbacker amps, which are pretty rare these days. You don't see them much in the public markets, but they were available, and I would pick them up here and there. And so I spent 30 years worth of collecting, basically.
Yeah. Yep. And as you were collecting and buying, you must have been developing a in your own head a picture of how their numbers worked, which is one of the things that I was a little gray on going into this, and still am, to be honest. But the difference between a 340 and a 330 and a 375 and a 425, right. It's not my understanding. Like Martin is pretty straightforward. You've got a D18, a 21, a 28, a 42, and it's all pretty clean and neat. The closest analogy to the Rickenbacker scheme would probably be like a Taylor organization, where they have it, the first digit in the model will denote the size, and then the middle number will denote the series. I forget exactly how it all works, but can you just run us, I know there's a lot there, but can you break it down into a nice little package how that works with?
Yeah, sure. There's a fairly uniform way of approaching this. I'm going to skip over the short scale ones because it's not really, they don't really fit the template. But let me just start with the ones that most people are familiar with, which is the 330 and 360 series. Anything beginning with a 3 is going to be a Capri. So it's going to have a glued in neck, and it's going to be 15 inches wide at the lower bound. It's going to have 21 frets. And there's 2 levels of trim. The 330 is 2 pickup guitar with a fixed tailpiece. 335, 2 pickup guitar with a vibrato. 340, 3 pickups, fixed tailpiece. 345, 3 pickups and a vibrato. So whenever there's a 3 at the beginning of the number, the 3-digit number, it's a Capri with a glued-in neck and so forth. The level of, if it's got a vibrato, it'll have a 5 at the end of it. And the number of pickups, increases as you go up the scale. From 330 is 2 pickups, 340 is 3 pickups, 330, 2 pickups, 3 pickups. And so that's the standard trims. Dot neck, no binding, 330 to 345. 4 different features on the guitar, pickups and vibrato being the variables. Then you shift up to the deluxe, what's called the deluxe model, which is the triangle inlays and a bound body of some form. But with the Capris, it's the double bound body. With the later 1964 and after, it's the rounded over, called the round tops, and the binding is in the back. There's checkered binding in the back of the guitar. So the numbering of the deluxe series starts with 360, 2 pickups and fixed tailpiece, 365, which is very common, 2 pickups and a vibrato, 370, which is uncommon, 3 pickups, fixed tailpiece, and then you get 375, which is 3 pickups and a vibrato. So, that's the numbering system for most of the Rickenbackers that you'll come in contact with. And that still carries over with the modern rigs. From vintage to modern, it's still pretty much the same template of the numbering system. And that's for what I'll call the Capri models. They're all glued in necks, and the different levels of trim. Now there's another class of Rickenbackers, the solid bodies. Now all the Capris are semi-hollow. Solid bodies are just what it sounds like. It's solid. It's a neck through construction, just like the basses. There's one long piece of wood that goes from the headstock to the butt end of the guitar, and the body wings are glued or fastened to that center strip, which serves as the neck and the bottom of the fretboard. And that's the 400 series. You got the very early years, 1957, 56, you get the model 400, which has 1 neck pickup and a huge pick guard over it. And it's a solid body with the neck through. A little later, you get to the 425, which, George Harrison had one of those and one for a brief period of time. So single pickup with a big pick guard and a dot neck. 450, same thing, single pick guard, two pickups, dot neck. And then the 460 is kind of an oddball. It's got the deluxe trim with the triangle inlays on the fretboard and 2 pickups and a very large pick guard. The other neck through series is the 600 series. Basically the 615, which is a solid through with the body wings glued. But the difference is the pickups are mounted on top of the body, just like the Capris are. In the 400 series, the pickups are underneath the pick guard, and they're mounted underneath the pick guard. So that's one big difference. Some of the photos I sent, I don't know if we'll get around to looking at the individual photos, maybe too many of them, but show that pretty clearly.
I can bring those photos up if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Is this? I've got two batches here. So I see
we were just, we talked, the large batch is all the Capris I just talked about. Yeah, let's look at this one now. That's what I'm talking about. The 400 is on the left with the green, and the gold pickguard. That's a 1956 first year for this model. And the pickup is a different pickup than the subsequent issues. It's a de-armament pickup that the Rickenbacker contracted with the de-armament people to put that pickup in. There's a very large pickguard, and if you take that pickguard off, there's a lot of there. You can see there's two. You can't really see it in this picture, but if you see the side of the guitar, there's a bolt running horizontally through an area just above the bridge, and there's another one just below the neck pickup that basically is bolting those two body wings onto the center neck, the one-piece neck, which you can see at the very bottom. I see you're pointing at it right now. It goes all the way through, and sometimes you see the serial number will be stamped on the very bottom of that piece of the neck. So that's the first 400, and also 400 model, and it's also got the cutaway is called a tulip. It's built. It kind of goes out like a flower, and we'll see the change coming on that pretty quickly because it was difficult to fret up on the neck. So let's go to the next picture. And it was basically, this is the two pickup model. This is a 450 in the tulip configuration. This would be a 1957 guitar. First year for this model, the 450 with you can see it's also the first year for the toaster top pickups, which you can see on this guitar.
What was their use scenario for this? Was this for kids to play pop music on, or
well, these are actually full. These guitars are full scale, and we kind of the short scale ones were back in the 300 series, which I didn't really cover. But that's a good question. I mean, Rickenbacker started off in making these kind of guitars in 1956, and there's a whole history there with how Rickenbacker got started. And Francis Hall, who was the founder of the Rickenbacker company that we know today, was a partner with Leo Fender and I can't remember the other guy's name, Don Randall. And in the early days, they were working together to put out amplifiers mostly. And Francis Hall broke away from them and bought Adolf Rickenbacker's factory, which he was using to make the bodies for lap steel guitars, which is another topic we don't have time to cover today. But that was Rickenbacker's claim to fame. They had the first, quote, electric guitar, close quote, which was a lap steel. And they made them successfully through the 30s and 40s, and other companies glommed onto that factor. And there's lots of lap steels from all kinds of different guitar companies during that period. It's very popular, Hawaiian music kind of thing for the 30s and 40s up till the World War II, and then it kept on after the war somewhat. But then in the 50s, of course, you have the electro-Spanish guitars being developed by Fender, and then Rickenbacker joined in. And I can't explain what the design philosophy was in these guitars, but it is what it is. If we can go to the next one, we'll see the difference. Now you can see that bass cutaway. It's no longer a tulip. This is called a cresting wave, and they basically just carved out a section of that on each side of the to make the cutaways. On the bass side, they carved out a section there that resulted in this kind of cresting wave, which is really carried over to the basses more than the guitars. And on the treble side, it's just a complete carve out to allow access to the upper frets. So this is a 425 model that was fairly popular low budget through the 60s. And after that, the next guitar would probably be a 450 with two pickups.
Is that fingerboard lacquered?
Yes.
Yes, it is. That's the that's the 450. A little bit earlier version with the metal pickguard. You can't really tell it's metal from this picture, but it is. And there's a bridge that's underneath the bridge cover that's been fairly standard for Rickenbacker for a long time, for a four-post bridge. That some people are not really happy with it, and they go to the mastery bridges on the newer models. But the bridge has remained the same from the late 50s up through the present time.
Ron, would the knob configuration where the volumes and the tones are relative to themselves be the same on the earlier Rickenbackers as the later ones?
Yes, the volumes are on the far right, towards the edge of the guitar. The tones are, the two that are closer to the middle of the guitar. The variation was in the Capris. In the Capris, for some reason, the tone pots were wired in reverse, so you flip counterclockwise on the tone controls. But ever since 61, they've been uniformly all, you all turn clockwise. So, that's that.
Interesting. Do you know why they did that as opposed to doing it like a Les Paul?
That's a question that comes up a lot. Some people who just getting into the Rickenbacker world, they rewire their guitar so it's like a Gibson. And I have no idea what the thinking behind that was.
Interesting. Can you briefly explain colors and the terminology?
Yeah, the terminology. This color was called natural, and it's basically a clear coat on untinted wood. And because this is a 1959 or 60 guitar, the aging has made it kind of amber colored. But originally, it was simply natural wood with a clear coat. The other very popular color is this color is called Fire Glow, and that remains a standard color of Rickenbackers through today. Really, the three standard colors are the natural, which in the 60s, like mid 60s, they decided to rename that maple glow because they got this glow thing going. There's maple glow, fire glow, the black finished guitars, they call them jet glow, starting in 1967. And also around that time, they introduced two brand new colors, a dark blue, which is called azure glow, and a dark burgundy, which is called burgundy glow. So 1967, 68, they had 5 standard colors. But up until the time, the natural and the fire glow were the dominant colors up through 1966.
Thank you.
What kind of numbers were they producing of these instruments? Was this runs of several thousand, or?
That's a really good question. I think up until the 64, they were a fairly small company producing batches of 25 of this, 25 of that. There's a book by Richard Smith, which was published in 1988, in which he went through the company records and tried to pinpoint how many guitars of each type were made. And he's got these spreadsheets and grids where he puts in the numbers that he derived from the company's records, but it's not complete because the Rickenbacker company was structured in 2 different divisions. They had what's called an electro string division, which was the general shop producing for pushing out to the dealers. And then they had an outfit called Radio Tel, which they used for specialty items, and they sell directly to artists and do promotional deals with some guitars and do some custom deals. So the Richard Smith book never really captured the full company records because he only had the shop records and not the other records that were kind of specialty guitars. But the answer to your question is they were a small company up until 1964, and the production was was very limited.
So when you were acquiring a guitar like this in the 90s, had this become a vintage guitar, or were you able to pick these up fairly reasonably?
Oh, they were fairly reasonable. This one we're looking at right now is a 460. It's a 1962. I probably paid $600 for that in the 90s, maybe five or $600.
It's a really attractive guitar.
Yeah, thank you.
The the smaller knob by the treble tone or volume and tone controls.
Oh yeah.
Can you explain?
Yes. Thanks for pointing that out, Carl. That is called a blend knob, and some people can and some people don't. Basically, what it does is just a practical matter. It lets you regulate the balance between the bridge pickup, the treble pickup, and the neck pickup. And it really is more of a boost for the bassy part of the neck pickup as you turn it counterclockwise. And some people say I just leave it in one position and that's all I do with it. Some people actually use it to vary the tone in different tunes that they might play, but that became a standard for the guitars, not the basses, but for the guitars in 1961, and pretty much carries through to today.
When did the stereo, the two jack stereo output begin?
Yeah, that started. Excuse me. It's called Rico sound, and it's two jacks on the side of the semi-hollow body guitars. The solid body that we're looking at now does not have that. Just has one input jack on the pickguard. But on the semi-hollows, they developed late in 1960 in the Capri line. They developed this the stereo jack input, which you need a stereo cord to plug into the stereo jack. But what it enables you to do is each pickup can go to a different amplifier. So you can have the treble pickup go to one amplifier and the neck pickup go to a different amplifier. And some people really have used this to great advantage, and other people simply don't understand it and don't want to have anything to do with it. I think Chris Squire was one who really got into this Rico sound thing. They do have it on the basses. And he was, running his treble pickup through one type of amp and a neck pickup through another, and he got this, his signature sound that way.
You wouldn't believe how many guitars we sell, and then people get them and plug the mono cord into the jack and then return the guitar because they did not know this.
Well, if you do that, the inevitable result is you get one pickup working and the other one doesn't work.
Unless you plug halfway in.
Unless you plug halfway in, that's right.
There's like a workaround with like a special cord, isn't there? Like,
yeah, you can get a splitter cord, or you can get Rickenbacker actually has this thing which they don't produce anymore, but they produced it back in the 60s called it's a Rico sound converter. It's a little box. Basically, it's got a stereo cord coming out of it to go into the guitar, and then coming out of the box are two separate mono cords to go to two different inputs on it. Two ups. You rig your own thing up, with the stereo to mono, to stereo input to two mono outs. And, people can do that if they want to.
These guitars were predominantly maple, correct? With a 3 or 5 piece neck with a walnut strip.
That's right. The Capris were marked by the walnut strip, which they still have today. In the 70s and 80s, the strip got very narrow, but in the 90s, they kind of brought back the wider center strip. It was originally made out of walnut, and then they used different woods, and I think now they make it out of roasted maple. I think so they do something to the maple to make it darker. and it's just a cosmetic thing. So 3-piece neck with primary maple, and the center strip is either walnut if it's vintage, or it's a roasted maple if it's a more recent vintage.
But it wasn't 100% maple. If I remember right, there were several of those guitars that we got from you that were ash and mahogany bodied.
That's right. They did have ash bodies on the Capris. When I say Capri, 1959, 1960 Capris would have alder bodies or sometimes birch bodies. And there's one of them in the lineup there that's actually a mahogany body with 3 pickups. Fairly rare for Rickenbacker to produce a mahogany body, but they all have the maple necks with the the center strip. Now this guitar we're looking at now is a 615. And again, it's different. Even though it's a solid body and it's got the neck through, the wings are put on, attached to the center strip, but the pickups are top mounted as opposed to being mounted under that large pick guard of the 400 series.
Why did they put such a point on the trem arm?
That's a really good question. People complain about that all the time because you can get seriously stabbed with that thing.
Is the fingerboard elevated in comparison to the other guitar? Is it a different neck angle?
That's a good point. It is on this model, on the 600 series. It's elevated. Of course, you can't really see it in this picture, but on the 400 series, which we started off this slide with, it's flush. It's flush to the body, and of course the pickups are underneath the guard. That's a big difference between those two models.
Those 600 series suffer the same fate as a 59 Les Paul Special, where the neck pickup was too close to the mortise joint, and they tend to fall in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a neck through like the other ones. It's just a small mortise.
Oh, okay. That's attractive.
Yeah, that's the deluxe part, the deluxe 600 series model, the 625. This is a 1962. And again, the deluxe means it's got binding and it's got the triangle inlays on the fretboard.
Cool. I just realized we can zoom in here.
Were the fret sizes on vintage Rickenbackers universal?
In my experience, the answer would be yes. They're a little bit on the low side, but they're pretty comfortable to play with.
I think that was the last one in that.
Yeah, that's right.
Should we start working through these?
Yeah, we can if you want. It maybe take a little while, but it'll be educational if you're interested.
Oh yeah.
This is 1958 325 with what's called a Kaufman vibrato. It's actually called a vibrola because it doesn't go up and down; it goes sideways. And it is a carryover from the lap steel guitars, some of which in the 40s were equipped with the same identical vibrato that you're looking at here. Here, I should correct myself and say vibrola. And very unpopular. It tends to make the strings go out of tune. There's a way you can pin that top mechanism to the bottom so that it solidifies itself. But if you don't pin it, it just wiggles around, and most people just find it very frustrating. And it really didn't last very long, as we'll see as we go through these guitars. In 1960, they got this other vibrato thing called the accent vibrato, which replaced the so-called Kaufman vibrato. And that's actually the accent vibrato is the one with the pointy arm to it. Another disadvantage, but be that as it may. So this was one of 30 guitars that were made in 1958. And it's got a 2-inch thick body. It's as light as a feather. They're made out of alder wood. It weighs about 5 pounds, 5.3 pounds, whatever. Very, very light, short scale, 21 frets. And as you can see, they started off with this guitar with 3 pickups and the 2 knobs. Basically, this guitar is wired so that the middle pickup is always active, and the pickup selector switch goes from bridge pickup to middle. In the middle, it's all 3 pickups, and towards you, it's the middle and the neck pickup. And several of these guitars with just the 2 controls, one master volume and one master tone, were returned to the factory to put in the 4 control business because it was too difficult to control the sound on the pickups with just a 1 master volume and master tone.
What material is that pickguard? Is that a metal pickguard or
No,
is that a painted?
it's a lucite plastic pickguard. It's gold, back painted gold, and you can see they kind of get green when they are close to the body. The upper part of that is a little bit greenish.
Cool.
But this is all original, 1958, and this set of 30 guitars, John Lennon's guitar was the first of this whole series. He just happened to grab it when he was in Hamburg, Germany. Some dealer had it. The one he had been returned to the factory, got 4 knobs on it, sent back to Germany, and John Lennon picked it up. And so these guitars in this run of 30 guitars in 1958 are very rare and very collectible.
In my research for this show, I learned about the difference between the F hole, like on the current picture and the last picture, versus the slash. Can you explain how that worked?
Well, I don't know why they got started with the F hole, but the F hole is peculiar to this short scale 325 series. Rickenbacker didn't really use the F hole on many other guitars until they got to the Rose Morris guitars, which don't have time to talk about today, but I can kind of give a gloss on that. It's called a 2 o'clock F hole because the way it's angled would be if you had a clock and the center of the F hole was the center of the clock, that top part of the F hole would be pointing towards the numeral 2 on a clock. And the first 6 of this 1958 325 series were what's called solid top. They had no F hole, and that was John Lennon's guitar was in that first batch of 6. After the 6, they started with the F holes for the remainder of the 30 guitar run. And I don't know what the reasoning was for that, but that's what they did.
How is this recess for the tremolo produced? Is that carved into?
Yes, that's a good question. That's called a ramp, and it is carved. Not so evident here. Maybe on some of the other ones will be more evident. But if in the interior of the body, they actually glue a block to the underside of the top to allow for the ramp to be carved out. So the vibrola or tremolo unit can sit below, the top of the guitar in terms of the geometry of the guitar. You can see the ramp more clearly on this picture.
Was that produced by hand, or do they lean into a belt sander with that? Or?
At this point, it's produced by hand. Yeah. Now this is. I just want to say that's the first one was the 325. That one with this one here is a 320, I believe, because it doesn't have the vibrola or vibrato, however you want to call it. And you can see it's advanced to the 4. Now the 4 pickup, the 4 knob configuration is standard from here on out. It was just in 1958 where they had that 2 knob configuration.
The timeline for Rickenbacker seems to peak at about 1958. What was happening in 1958 at Rickenbacker that led to so many models being introduced that year?
That's a really good question. I have to believe, and when I was working on this Rickenbacker book that I worked on with Martin Kelly, we were puzzling over the same thing, and we just came to the conclusion that Rickenbacker uh, transitioned from guitars that had horseshoe pickups, and we don't have any of those here to show, but uh, to these toaster top pickups and the configuration of three. I think they must have looked at the Stratocaster and said, well, we want to go full boat with these guitars, so we're going to have three pickups just like the Stratocaster. I think Rickenbacker had their eye on Fender and their eye on Gibson, where different things were happening with Fender and Gibson in that time period. And I think there was a little bit of copying going on there. But there really isn't a lot of reason or rhyme to why they would start the 58 production with these short scale three pickup guitars. That's just what they did.
The tailpiece on this one is there some kind of catch mechanism under there that how are the strings being held on?
There's something going on. Somebody did some Photoshop on this tailpiece because there should be holes there, but they're for whatever reason, Photoshop or reflection, they're not shown. But there's a hole for each string on the top of that. It's called a trapeze tailpiece, and they use that for both the 6 and the 12 strings. Before they developed the R tailpiece, the big letter R, which they developed in '64.
And I noticed that the saddles are slammed all the way back. Was there intonation issues with these instruments when they were?
There probably were intonation issues with the earlier ones. I can't explain why this one is all set back like that.
Okay.
And do we know if they were using straight nitro like Fender or Gibson would be using in those?
No, they stopped the nitro in 1959, and after that, it's something called a conversion varnish that was used from 1959, latter part of 59, all the way up through 2011, when they switched over to a UV cured varnish.
So that tailpiece has holes in it.
Yeah, that's not been photoshopped, so you can see the holes there. And this is a 310 because it's two pickups and no vibrato. So it's the basic short scale model stripped down. It would have had an R tailpiece, but at this point the R hadn't been developed. This is a very early '64 guitar.
The F hole is becoming more upright. It seems.
Yeah. The F hole it changed in '64. It started to be called what's called a 1 o'clock F hole as opposed to a 2 o'clock. You can see it there as well. Now, this is a little later one. I don't have the year in front of me, but obviously with the R tailpiece, it's post early '64, probably '65 or '66.
This is another vibrato example.
Yeah, that's called the accent vibrato. That's the same one that used throughout up until the early 2010, 2015. They basically dropped that vibrato.
What's going on with the extra screws on the pickup mounting rings? Were they having problems with pickups falling out, or?
Well, there's 6 screws on the pickup mounting ring. The ones in the middle are attaching the pickup to the guitar. The ones on the corners are basically attaching the bottom plate underneath the pickup to the top pickup cover, and underneath all of those are little rubber grommets. that separate the pickup from the metal pickup from the wood of the guitar.
Carl, what do you think? Should we move next picture?
Sure.
Yeah, keep going. Or if you want, we could also go back to the scene from the collection room up there. We got through half of it, but the other half has some very interesting stuff in it too.
Yeah, let's plow through this. There's some crazy stuff in here.
It's all really great.
Well, we're starting with the full scale Capri with the 15-inch wide body. This is a 1958 fairly early Capri. Again, it's a 330 because it doesn't have the deluxe trim. It has dot fingerboard and no body binding.
I noticed.
Go ahead.
Is fancier more valuable in these in the early days, or is more Spartan appointments? Is that
fancy? Definitely, fancy is more valuable. And
okay.
I noticed that one doesn't have the raised. That last one didn't have the raised part of the pick guard between the pickups. When did
that's right. Yeah, in the early this was a 58, and in 58 they started with just a single pick guard. That's a good catch, Carl. And later in 58 they had the top guard, the half guard on the top on the between the pickups.
In this area.
Yep.
Yeah.
And here it is there. But it doesn't look like the
stand. You can see the top guard.
It looks like this. Oh, it looks like the standoff on that one is subtle, or maybe it's just the angle of it.
Well, it's got a little bit of an extension on that Kaufman vibrola. You can see at the very bottom. It's extended, so it actually comes above the ramp, which probably means that this guitar, the break angle is not so good at the bridge. But this does have the top guard, and you can see the rest of them are going to have the top guard. This is a mahogany body, 345, 3 pickups and the vibrola, and it's also got the extension on the bottom of the Kaufman. This is not now this would be a 360 because it's got the triangle inlays and it's got the body binding, double bound, both front and back are bound.
What's the technology for the knob style on these earlier ones versus the later?
Well, they had the so-called oven knobs, which you can see here, pretty much through 1963, and then they went with the chrome top knobs for the domestic production, and then they had a Rose Morris production, which really don't have time to cover here, which had the solid black knobs.
I see a back brace in there. Is that unusual for?
Yeah, that's a good catch. There were some of them in a certain time period in early '59 that had a cross brace going, from right to left, a horizontal brace, which you can see through the sound hole. Most of them are X braced, which is just what it sounds like. There's 2 braces crossed, and from the bass horn back down to the treble bout and vice versa, almost uniformly. But at a certain period, they had the one horizontal brace going across, as this guitar illustrates.
Did they always route from the back and then glue the back onto the front of the guitar, or was there a time when they did it the opposite way?
They for this Capri series, it's been standard. They take a billet and they hollow it out from the back, and they glue the back on. After they glue the neck in, then they glue the back on. And it sounds very laborious, but that's how they did it. And there's an exception. We get to later on to the F bodies, the very large ones. They stopped carving it out, and they did like the Gibson kind of sides and put the front and the back on the the bent sides kind of thing. But for these the guitars we're looking at now, it's all carved out from the back, and
That
they
sounds
still
like a
do.
lot of work.
They
And
still do that today. Yeah,
How,
there's a,
how many times in your career of collecting these have you had to have someone pull the neck out and adjust the angle?
I've actually had that done once.
How'd it go?
It went really well. There's a luthier who's developed this technique. Well, I should start back up. It was a long thought to be the conventional wisdom that you had to take the back off these guitars in order to reset the neck, and that's creates quite a mess, especially if you have binding on the back. But recently, there's at least two people I know who do a lot of work with Rickenbackers that have figured out a way to put heat links on either side of the neck joint, and they basically have a contraption where they push the heated neck out without having to take the back off. And that seems to work really well for them.
Because the neck angle can be a real problem on these. If there's
Yeah, it definitely can, because that glued in neck over time will, get a little bit loose, which, causes action problems. Yeah, but
How are these inlays done? Was that inlaid or was that poured?
it's inlaid,
it's inlaid.
and they're thick. They're really thick, and so they're tricky to get out.
I can only imagine. Oh, that's nice looking.
Yeah, we're out of the Capris now. We're into the, this is the 65 330 again, two pickups and no vibrato. So it's the 330 is the proper designation for this.
Are any of these guitars that we're looking at, or do any of these guitars we're looking at have dual truss rods, or would these still all be single rods?
Well, that's a really good question. Let me back up. During the Capri era, by that I mean 59, 60, 58 to 60, very early 61, single truss rod. Starting in 61 with the new body shape, which you can see this shape is different than the Capris. The horns are thicker and the waist is a little bit down. They had two truss rods on the all the guitars through until 2022, where they started to go to a single truss rod. So all the guitars we're looking at here are going to have double truss rods, starting in 61 and going through to 2022.
Ian, I don't know if you can do it quickly, but I sent a photo of the contraption at the last fret where you get a dual truss rod visual. It's for someone not working on these things regularly, that's a good thing to know, because you can take those rods in and out.
Oh yeah, I got that in there. This?
Yeah.
Well, that would be at the nut. And so you can see how there's just a piece of iron in there that's holding it all together. But there's a nut on the back, and you can take that nut off and slide the whole rod in and out.
Right.
But you got to be careful on the new ones, because they heat shrink them. And if you try and get them out, that heat shrink tubing can accordion in there, and you're never going to get it out. Learn that one the hard way.
Where were we? We were here, I believe.
Yeah. That's you had it right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the 335, because it's got the vibrato. It would be a 330 if it had a fixed tailpiece like the one previous. Again, standard trim, no inlay, dot neck, and no binding. 335.
That is a pokey looking tremolo bar.
Yeah, this is a 340. Pretty rare. 3 pickups and fixed tailpiece.
Boy, once they switch to the conversion varnish, the colors really they don't get that same look, do they?
Yeah,
Over time.
this is not such a great look on this guitar. It's a little better. This is a 345. That's the top of the 300 to 345, 330 to 345 range. Again, standard trim, dot neck, no binding, 3 pickups and a vibrato.
Did their tailpiece design evolve over the years? Or did they pretty much have one style?
Well, the tailpieces for the 6 strings were...
I misspoke. The bridge.
Oh, the bridge. Well, the bridge is different on the 400 series. It's got what's called a compensated bridge, you know, the ones that kind of wiggles around and is indented for, I think, the G string. But all these Capris had the same 4-post bridge from the early Capri days until the current day. You can't really see it because the bridge cover's on there.
Yeah.
This is a pretty rare color, Azure Glow, 1968, 365.
Was it rare to bind that F hole, or
the binding on the sound hole is a part of the deluxe trim for the 360 plus guitars. It goes with this guitar. These guitars, the round tops, are so called, are bound in the back, and the sound hole is also bound. On the 330 to 345 series, the sound hole is not bound.
Dave Stouty was wondering, this was all at the factory in Los Angeles?
Yes, they had they've always had one factory. It started in Los Angeles in '62. They moved to Santa Ana, and they're still there. One factory. This is a 370, 3 pickups, fixed tailpiece. It's also what's called a double bound. These could be special ordered in the style that the early Capris were, with the binding on both sides and the pointy horns. Even though the round top rounded off those horns, this is called the old style. So it's a 370 OS, which again could be special ordered. And the sound hole on these is not bound.
Were there any Gibson models where Gibson was like trying to compete with this? Like, look at this, and I think, was that Trini Lopez like kind of trying to get all Rickenbackery with it, or?
I don't know.
Oof.
Yeah, this is a unusual color. It's only done in 1968, and it's a very limited number of guitars. It's called. It doesn't have a formal name. It's Rickenbacker would say this is a really dark autumn glow, which I invented a name for it. I call moon glow. There's a story behind that. I was doing a feature for Premier Guitar Magazine and explaining to them that the standard finish is like a sunburst. It's called fire glow. And the person I was working with said, well, look at this car. This guitar looks like it's a moon glow, not a fire glow. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good name for that color. So yeah, this is a 375, the full trim, the fretboard, the sound hole, and you can't see the binding in the back, but it's bound, checker bound in the back.
What year did they start with the round top?
1964 was when they switched to the round top.
Was that just a production thing or an ergonomic thing? What?
No, well, the story behind it was that they were getting complaints from some of the female guitar players that the edges on the non-rounded guitars, like all the Capris, all the 58 to 60 Capris were just double edge bound, or just had edges that weren't bound. So somebody came up with the idea of rounding off the edges, and that's what you're looking at now. and it just stuck. And the irony is that when George Harrison's guitar came out, it's Rickenbacker 12 string in early '64. That's exactly the time when Rickenbacker went from the double edge bound to the round top. So they kind of missed that whole George Harrison enthusiasm. Everybody's looking for these, George Harrison style guitars, which they stopped making. They're all round tops from then on, except for the special orders that I just mentioned, where you could get the double bound guitar with the pointy horns.
What's the fingerboard wood on these guitars?
It's generally some form of rosewood. I'm not that savvy about different types of woods, but I've heard recent ones is Chechen wood and different types of rosewood, like Caribbean rosewood. On recent models, I think in the '60s it was basically rosewood.
Yeah.
In Indian rosewood probably, although the really early ones had some Brazilian rosewood.
Is Paduk a wood that they would have used?
Yeah, Paduk, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but something like that. Yeah. Now this is where it's segueing into the F bodies. These are 17 inches wide at the lower bout, and they are not carved out from the back. They're built like a Gibson, 335 or 345 with the curved edges and the front and back, laminated to the edges. So these are hollow body guitars. They really don't have much internal bracing going on. And it's called the F body. This is the standard this is a 330 F for F body. 2 pickups and a fixed tailpiece.
How rare are F bodies?
These are pretty rare. There's 2 generations of F bodies. There's the 58 to 60. This one I think is a 60. They stopped making the F bodies in '61, and then they made them again in '67 with a different configuration. Which there's some of those at the end of this sequence here.
Were they trying to break into a market with that, or
they were trying to go for the jazz player market? I think big box idea. These are 2 inches thick. This is actually one of the first ones, which they actually carved out from the back. After they did a few of these, they said, this is not working very well. These are really wide guitars. And that's
an attractive guitar.
Yeah, it's the 2-tone brown, which is the standard color for 58, and it's got the vibrato, and it's a heavy guitar. I've had that for a while.
Is the neck narrow on that, or is it just the perspective with the larger body?
I'm sorry, what was your question again, please?
Oh, is the neck feels like it looks a little narrow? Is that just the?
I think the neck is the standard width. It's just that the body's so big.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah,
this is a 345, so it's the full load for the standard dot neck, 3 pickups and a musical. I call it the musical instrument vibrato. This was a specially made vibrato unit for these F bodies.
Look at this shape.
Yeah.
For the sunburst or the fire glow.
Fire glow, right.
They really.
Yeah, that's kind of faded out, but it looks great.
Yeah. Is it that orange in person, or is it?
We'll go through a few of these, and you'll see all different intensities of the fire glow. This happens to be a really unusual one. It's birch wood, and it's got a tortoise shell binding on it.
Oh wow!
I got this from a guy in Sweden. Some semi-famous Swedish guitar player used to have this guitar. This is that got an F body, 360, as it has the inlays on the fretboard and it's got the binding.
Huh.
I've never seen another one like that with the figured wood, birch wood.
Was he the original owner to it, or?
I don't. It may have been made for him. That's a good point.
Could you have called Rickenbacker in the 60s, 50s and custom ordered a guitar?
Oh yes, definitely.
How much allowance did they have? Could you really specify, like, I want birch, or did they say, well, we'll find something that will work?
Well, I think from what I understand, it was celebrities could get their way with what they wanted to have. You couldn't just be an ordinary customer and say, I want a special wood on my F body guitar.
It's almost as like maybe they were thinking about the Roundup or something when they were making this one. But
That could be.
that's pretty neat. Is this on the cover of a book? I feel like
this is one of the ones on the video of Dave's collection. 365 with the really long extension on the Kaufman vibrola, and the inlays on the fretboard, double bound. I don't think this one is checker bound. I can't see it enough.
I think there's a checker binding on it.
Oh, it is checker bound. Okay. This is the 375 with 3 pickups and the vibrato. Again, this musical note thing. There's a little badge on there that's the darker part on the vibrato unit. It's brass. Basically, the chrome wore off of the brass, and it says "Accent by Paul," which is some guy named. Last name is Paul. Actually invented this kind of a vibrato, and Gibson also has the same style of vibrato for some of its guitars in that time period. Now we're jumping up to the second generation of the F bodies, which is you can see the controls are mounted along the perimeter of the treble bout. Yeah, a tiny little white pick guard. Underneath that pick guard are 2 holes to give somebody access to get those pots repaired or replaced or whatever. And this only came in with a fixed tailpiece. It came with so this is a 360F of the second generation, and then the next one after this would be a 370F. And this again is the moon glow, so to speak, color of a very rare, only in 1968, and very limited production.
Is my color right on that? Is that like a purplish color?
It's a really dark cherry around the edge, which fades into almost kind of a watermelon kind of color in the middle.
Go ahead, Carl.
Are the second generation F bodies more rare than the first generation?
Yes, they are. They didn't make that many of them, and this also has a very elongated R tailpiece this was specially made for this second generation F body series. It's got a pretty long sound hole, longer than you would find on the regular Capris at that time. I
don't know if I've ever even seen that before. Are there musicians currently using anything like this?
Not that I'm aware of. No. No, these are very rare, and it's just flat out rare, rarer than the first generation.
Are they worth more then?
Yes, they are.
Double?
So that's not quite double. I mean, it depends. Some of them might be equivalent. This is a 370. Same thing, 370F. same construction as the previous one, just an extra pickup in the middle.
All right. I think that's it for that.
Yeah, that's it for that.
And we got a couple more videos.
So this is the Dave's collection. You can see that 325 there with the 415. Some of the more later 60s guitars with the white guard. Some F-hole guitars that are Rose Morris exports. So some round tops there.
Ooh, the black.
Some of these are 12 string. Yeah, that's a 12 string, that black one. Pretty sure. And just more round tops.
It seems very odd to choose to go bind the back of the guitar as a requirement.
Can you pause on those last?
Yeah, the last two are models we haven't discussed yet. They're 381, and you can kind of tell. You can kind of see there's a German carve all around the edge of this guitar, and these were developed in 1969. The blonde one, you can see a little bit more clearly the carve on that.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, and that's got double checkered binding.
How did they produce that carve? Was that a pin router move, or
I think it's all hand done. These early ones, the back carve is really exaggerated on these, which of course you can't see.
There's this one has it as well.
Yeah.
Ron, do you think it's worth discussing Roger Rossmeisl?
Yeah, Roger Rossmeisl.
Rossmeisl, sorry.
Yeah, he contributed a lot to these different designs that we're looking at. He and his dad had a guitar making shop in Germany, and after the war, Roger decided to come to the U.S. His dad was having trouble with the legal authorities. There's all kinds of stories there, but he started working for Gibson in 1953, and he and Ted McCarty didn't get along for some reason. And so Roger went to Rickenbacker in the early 60s and was responsible for some of these design things we're seeing, like certainly this German carve was his idea. It carried over from the guitars he used to make, which had the identical kind of carve around the top. And he, his design contributions back to 63 or 62, some of these designs were of his origin. I can't remember all the details, but there's a Rickenbacker book that's out that I worked with Martin Kelly on and published it in 2021. It goes into great depth about Roger Rossmeisl's influence on different aspects of these Rickenbacker guitars from the time he was there, which was I misspoke. He went to Gibson in the 50s, in the early 50s. He ended up at Rickenbacker at around 1956, and he left Rickenbacker around 1962. So he was responsible for the Capri designs and the sound hole business and the cresting wave thing and a number of other little things that all add up to be a very distinguish the Rickenbacker guitars.
Ian, can you scroll in on that guitar that's in the middle on the pickups?
I can't, unfortunately.
Are we looking at a toaster pickup and a high gain pickup on that one, Ron?
Well, I think definitely the top one is a toaster. They started using the high gains with this 381 model. That they were using toasters exclusively on everything up until that point. They developed this high gain pickup, which had a higher output than the toasters. But some of these 381s still have the toasters on them. it looks like the one in the middle that's we're looking at now. Looks like the bridge pickup might be a high gain pickup. I just can't tell from the lighting.
Yeah. Um, let's see here.
Why don't you pull? Yeah, there's some strange ones in there.
Yeah.
Actually, why don't we go back to the beginning? Did you put this together, Carl?
Yeah, it's just a real basic timeline of some of the major models and their introductions. I think we touched on most of this.
Okay. What's this guy?
Yeah, we didn't get into these guitars, but that's called a combo, and it got a horseshoe pickup. It's been carved out from the back. You can see the back of the guitar is shown up on the right hand side. There's a kind of an aluminum cover that if you took that off, you would see that it's a hollowed out chamber body, and the controls are mounted from the inside.
Do you think it's
this is a 19?
Oh, sorry, Ron.
Go ahead.
Do you think it's a fair way to look at those first combos as kind of like, the Tele, a Telecaster 52, a Les Paul 52, a Duo Jet 54, give or take? Is this Rickenbacker's response to the other major companies' solid bodies?
That's a good question. To me, this is like taking their very often produced horseshoe pickup for the lap steels and the steel guitars and sticking it onto a body. And they actually hired a design consultant to figure out what shape this guitar should be, and that's what they ended up with. And this was really their first. This is a 1954. Their first electro-Spanish guitar was part of this batch in 1954, and most of them were in either natural or a blonde finish, slightly milky finish. This was the first kind of colored guitar that they made with a turquoise color.
Have you owned one of those?
Yeah, I own this one.
And does it play good, or is it?
Yeah, it plays well. The neck angle's good. It's a bolt-on neck, and so you can adjust the neck angle to some degree. The problem with these guitars was the horseshoe pickup. People you can't palm mute it. You can't. It's kind of clunky, and so it's kind of limited in terms of the sound you can get out of it.
Are they heavy?
No, because it's chambered. The body's really carved out from the back.
Mm.
That's pretty cool looking. That's really cool looking.
Yeah, those are 54s.
It seems like something Ry Cooder would be interested in. Is he constantly buying these or something? Or
he may. They're great for steel guitar. Great for slide guitar playing. They got the really strong horseshoe pickup. Now this is something called a light show. This is when Rickenbacker was running out of ideas to keep people interested in their guitars. They took a 330 guitar, hollowed it out from the front, put a bunch of lights inside of it. That the lights are red, green, and blue, and they correspond to whatever note you're playing on the guitar. And there's a whole electronic hookup to this that isn't shown in this picture, but you have to have a special electronic hookup to make this thing work. But as you play, the theory is, and the practice is, as you play this guitar, especially in a darkened room, you can see the lights lighting up behind these kind of plastic covers over the front of the guitar.
That's great. Ron, do you know Buzzy Levine?
Oh yeah, yeah.
We had a Rick banjo in there that was pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, that's called a bantar, and some people actually play that. Doug Dillon played one of those in the band with the Dillons, and Roger McGuinn had one, played it for a little bit.
There's the comb.
Yeah, this is the dreaded comb. It's right now in a non-engaged position, but to engage it, you'd slide it over from the right to the left with the little arm that's tucked into a big screw there by the sound hole, and then you pull it. You pull it up and hook onto the octave strings, and you pull that arm down and rest it against that screw by the sound hole, and it pulls down the octave strings. So you're with your playing hand, you're hitting just the main strings, but with your fretting hand, you're fretting all 12 strings.
This just looks like unbridled optimism, doesn't it? Just like we're gonna sort this out, fellas. You just wait.
Right. Yeah, this didn't last very long. Now there's guitar you've seen before. Now it's in Dave's collection. These are 3 F bodies. 1, 2, 3, 3, 6, 3. Yeah, this is a 625.
Some of these might be redundant coming up.
Is anything for sale at Dave's Guitars anymore, Carl, or is it just a museum now?
No comment.
Yep.
Round top.
Yep.
Oh, we can zoom in on these
381s. There we go. Yeah, that's a good angle.
This is the high gain, isn't it?
Yeah, those are high gains on that guitar. They're very tiny screws. The first generation high gains.
Do people generally prefer one over the other?
Well, started in 73, they dropped the toasters and they went to high gains for everything.
How much more high gain are they?
Well, the toaster pickups of that era were generally output between 6 and 7 k ohms, and the high gains are in the 11 to 12 range.
It's
a big jump.
It's a pretty big jump.
Now that's called a banjoline, and it's a 381 shaped body, and it's got a very thin neck with 6 strings. 2 of them are doubled. The 2 on the treble strings are doubled, and yeah, that's a double neck.
What was the use?
Do those ones with the German curve on the top have that same German curve on the back?
Yeah.
No, these have a flat back. That's a good question.
Good question.
There was a guy named Eddie Peabody who was a banjo player, and he picked up they designed this guitar for him, and he took to it, and he's put out records back in the mid 60s, late 60s, and these were just another effort by Rickenbacker to kind of get into some groove, because after 68 or so, the 12-string craze really died off, and they were really riding high on the 12-string craze. So they were coming up with things like the converter comb to convert the 12 into a 6, the light show to have something a little different, these banjolines to appeal to banjo players to make them transition to a guitar-shaped instrument. A lot of the kind of oddball stuff going on in the late 60s and early 70s with the Rickenbacker guitars.
Wow.
This is actually a 1963 one-off double neck with a semi-hollow body.
No comb necessary on that one.
Yeah.
Switch. Oh, this is.
Yeah, these are Capris from the 50, 58, 59, 60.
What was the honey color? Is that just a?
That's called an autumn glow.
Autumn glow. Boy, that's attractive.
I think both those are ash. That's why I took that photo.
It could be. I'm not a real. The one on the left is pretty sure it's alder. It's got a little bit of flame to it.
What are
The
these
one on the right,
numbers?
I'm not really sure.
Those serial numbers?
Yes.
We've looked at this one.
We looked at that one too.
There's that crazy vibrola.
Crazy vibrola. Right.
Toasters.
Right.
High gains.
Right. That's the underside of the vibrola. It shows you how loosey goosey it is.
Yeah, it looks like a belly dancing move or something. And then
That was one of the longer ones.
Carl's got a tip for these.
Oh yeah. The trick for 12 strings and truss rod adjustments is you can take those the 3 highest strings on the bottom side and loosen those ones up, and then if you go to the next photo, you can slide the cover out sideways on them, because otherwise you have to loosen everything up, adjust it, string all 12 up, tune them up. It's a real pain. So if you know just to take those 3 off, you can get that truss rod cover out there, and then only have to tune up 3 strings in order to adjust your truss rod.
Cool.
Well, you've got one of the newer ones there, Carl.
Yeah,
because that's got a single rod.
Yeah, this is just a newer one.
This is popping the rods out.
Yeah.
We have somebody that wants to share a picture of a Rick that they just worked on. Trevor, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Got a cat on me though.
You want to do some screen sharing? And
yep, I just pulled it up. 1 second. I just had this guy in.
First time listener, long time caller, Trevor.
Yeah, that's an F body.
Is that the birch top?
It's hard to say. It could be.
What'd you have to do to it?
So frets were virtually non-existent. So I did a refret. Right here, there was a, big old crack, which was basically right along the body core center. So I did an epoxy fill and did some color. Thankfully, the one that was kind of under this area was basically right along the guard edge, so that was fine. And the binding in the waist on the back was coming up, so I had it all rigged up to glue that back on. There's an interesting photo further back. This was something that I neglected to look at earlier when I just took the pickups out, was I assumed that the hole was just straight through, and it actually went into another chamber here. So you'd try and feed the wire in and went into a chamber and you couldn't connect it. So I had to rig up this thing where I put just enough of the wire in here and enough of a hook on a dowel or a rod, which was actually probably a coat hanger, and feed that in and grab it and just pull and wiggle until I could get it through, and then solder the wire on and get the pickup wire through. So that was like 35 minutes of hell, but got it done.
Awesome.
I loved the discoloration there though on the holes.
That's those rubber grommets doing their job there.
And the basically what seems like a hand cut hole under the pick guard.
Yeah, some of those are pretty darn rough. That's not too bad. I've seen a lot rougher.
Do you think that was some kind of a, handheld saw,
Beats me.
or
It
just
must have been back in the 50s.
Anyway, this thing sounds wonderful, and
I bet they were smoking a cigarette while they cut that hole.
probably. So
Ron,
that's that.
Ron, do you know any luthiers that specialize and focus on Rickenbackers?
Yeah, I do. There's a guy in Florida. His name is Larry Davis. Davis Guitar Works. He does really great work with Rickenbackers. There's a guy named Dale Fortune, who's in, I think he's in Oregon, who worked at the Rickenbacker factory in the 70s. Again, knows Rickenbackers really well and does good work on them. Both those guys are getting old. I mean, they're in their mid to late 70s. So, I don't know anybody else who I would say is an expert on Rickenbackers repair, restoration. There's a guy named Paul Wilsinski who used to be very active in the Rickenbacker repair market. Long way away. So that's all I can think of at the moment in terms of people who are really specialized in Rickenbacker restoration.
Carl, where'd you go? I don't see you anymore.
Did I lose my image?
I see your windowsill. There you go.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a very specialized world. Well, I think that pretty much covered everything that I was thinking, Ron. Do you have anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think that really covers it. One thing we didn't get into is the whole Rose Morris situation and the whole separate numbering scheme that Rose Morris, which is a UK importer that was very active with Rickenbacker in 1964 through 67. They placed a huge order for Rickenbacker guitars that would be unbound, dot neck, F hole, and they were very popular with the Brits. And a lot of people who made Rickenbackers famous were British musicians. Pete Townsend, of course, George Harrison, Jerry Marsden, some other people I can't think of at the moment. But the little bit of history, there was an embargo in the UK against guitars coming from America. So the UK musicians had to go with, British-made guitars like Vox or what's the other one? I can't think of the name. The big made those big guitars, Bison guitars, and then Czechoslovakian, like George Harrison played a Grazioso Futurama. But in 1962, the embargo was lifted, and this Rose Morris company was an importer for the UK. They contacted Rickenbacker and started ordering a bunch of guitars, and they basically ordered the same guitars that Rickenbacker was making, except with the F hole and no trim. And they I think from 1960 through 67, there was, I think, a total of 1,200 guitars that were made and shipped to the UK, ordered by Rose Morris. They put such a demand on the very thinly staffed Rickenbacker factory that Rickenbacker at some point was way behind in their orders fulfillment to Rose Morris. So Rose Morris basically said, "We're done with you. That's it. That's the end." And so that the period of time where those guitars were made, they're all very rare and very collectible. And usually they're very well played. I mean, they're not under the bed type of guitars. They're show the play wear.
Would
And
those have had a different numbering system, like the 1996? They were like the same as the 330, but they called them a different.
yeah, I could run through the numbering system. The 1993, the lowest, it ranged from 1993 to 1999. And no real logic to it, but it just happened to be the Rose Morris catalog numbers. So 1993 was actually the 12 string, which was the last one developed for Rose Morris, which actually has binding, a double edge bound body and a dot neck. The 1995 is the equivalent of a 615. It's the solid body with the neck through and the body wings. The 1996 is the 325 equivalent, exactly the same guitar. The 1997 would be a 330 guitar with an F hole. The 1998 is a 340, 3 pickups and F hole. And the 1999 was the 4001S bass, which is basically the bass with a dot neck bass with a rounded edge body, not no body trim on it. And so that's the numbering scheme.
All right, I have one last question on what is the what's the Holy Grail 1959 Les Paul of Rickenbackers, and what are those worth?
I didn't quite get the first part of your question, Carl. I'm sorry.
What are the most collectible Rickenbackers on the market? Like, if you have one of these, it's like owning a 59 Les Paul of Rickenbackers. And how much would something worth?
It would be the most collectible and the highest dollar amount you could get would be one of the 30 1958 325s because of the John Lennon connection. And I've seen those go in the private market for one that was identical to Lennon's, natural color, very nice shape, went for 100,000 to somebody in the Ralph Lauren family. But generally, those go for if they're original shape, they go for 60 plus.
Wow. Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a comment or question. When I got into this in the early 90s, someone brought me a short scale 12 string, I think from the 60s. It had the individual saddles, and I intonated it for him at the 12th fret. And then a few days later, he came back. He said, "This thing doesn't play in tune at all." And I showed him on my Peterson strobe tuner that it intonated perfectly at the 12th fret. And he said, "Play some chords in other areas." And I started, fretting at the 5th fret and the 7th fret, and it was not in tune at all. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to make it kind of all out of tune so it tunes better in these other areas, which is what I had to do. And I'm wondering if you've ever had to deal with that, Carl, or any other techs in here.
Did you say this was a short scale 12 string?
It was a short scale 12 string. It was that dark blue color.
The
This guy
glow?
found it, and he was like, I've been searching for this guitar forever. He was very gracious and nice about it, but I had to kind of make it all out of tune for it to even somewhat play in tune.
What was it, a solid body?
Well, this was like in 92 or 93. I do not recall.
No.
I think so.
It must have been because
but I just, made it play better in tune around the 5th through 7th fret. And then it worked out. I don't think it was in tune at all above the 12th fret.
Did you have to move the bridge?
No, just the saddles.
Oh, okay. All right.
I remember it did have the individual 12 saddles on it.
Well, that was probably something that what time period was this again, please? like 90s.
Early 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever
I
seen a
don't think what
Rickenbacker.
about a 12 string, but
I've certainly seen frets in the wrong spot on guitars, but I can't recall ever seeing it on a Rickenbacker. So it sounds like a bridge placement issue, if anything.
well, they came out with the 12 individual saddle bridge for the Roger McGuinn signature issue, which was 1988, and that became a popular, switch to people with 12 strings were buying those 12 saddle bridges and putting them on whatever guitar they had, whatever 12 string they had, just to get the intonation right.
Ron, are you a fan of the mastery stuff?
I really haven't tried it. I've heard that the one little drawback is you can't use a wound G on the mastery for whatever reason. I've heard good things from people, but I personally haven't tried it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, unless anyone has any other questions or if there's anything else you want to touch on, Ron, I think that was probably one of the best explanations of Ricky's I've heard.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I have a comment about a interesting repair I had on a 4001 bass that came in because the gentleman had quite a while ago improperly adjusted the truss rods. Cranked them down without putting pressure on the neck, and pretty much stripped out the ends and popped the fretboard
Right.
off the front of the neck.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just put it away for a while. In intervening years, that fretboard was unable to be clamped back down to glue it. So I had to figure out why that was. And I found that there's actually a lead plate under, I think it was around the fifth or seventh, between the fifth or seventh frets, that I guess was used to tame wolf notes or maybe balance the neck better. I'm not really sure what the exact reason was for that. So the only fix for that was to remove the fretboard, sand down or scrape down that plate where it was impeding its ability to glue the fretboard down, reset and re-glue that fingerboard. So at the time, I took the opportunity to replace those truss rods with a newer version. I think it's made by a British company called Ricky Sounds.
Right.
That are very, very nice.
Yep.
They're welded instead of just bent hairpin metal, and they work really, really well. So fortunately, the repair came out well, but I just thought that was interesting to see because I was never aware of that plate before.
Yeah, I've heard about that plate. I've never actually taken apart the neck as you described, but I've heard that it's located somewhere between the fifth and the seventh frets, I believe.
That's as I recall. I have a picture on my phone, but I can't pull it up at the moment. It's not on the computer. I would share it. Other than that, it's nothing that much to see. It's just a plate inlaid into the fingerboard itself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But the truss rod replacements, even with the fingerboard on, is quite simple to pull those in and out.
Right.
I just thought I'd share that. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thanks, Craig.
You're welcome, everyone.
All right. Hey, can we unmute and thank Ron and Carl for hanging out with us? Because, man, that was good.
Great. Thank you, Ron and Carl, for everything. It was fantastic.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks,
Yeah,
fellas.
I have a Rickenbacker neck here that I took the fretboard off that has this plate if anyone wants to see.
Yes. Yes, do put it on.
Coming at you. 1 second.
Fellow wild-haired gent.
There you go.
Yes, good.
So this is the fretboard. This is the plate.
I see.
Wow.
And you can see it's a bit proud of the fretboard itself here.
Yeah. Yeah, you might have to shave that down a bit in order to get the fretboard back down, glue it on. That's what I had to do.
Yeah, it seemed like it. I thought maybe taking off from the neck side.
I think it's easier just to scrape the plate down and not mess with the neck.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
It was simple enough. Yeah. It's lead, so it's quite soft.
Oh, great. I did not get that far. Sweet. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
That's crazier than a Gretsch truss rod.